Welcome to this quick tip from South Auckland Wood Turners Guild. In this action I'm going to show you several ways of mounting wood on the lathe. The first is simply a piece of spindle turning between centres. We're going to use a step centre to drive the wood and a step centre on the tail of the lathe. This is a self-ejecting lathe, so you've just got to make sure that is far enough forward to engage the Morse taper on there properly. So now we'll just mark the end of our wood in the easy way and both ends so that we get our wood nicely central on the mount, and we'll put a little ding in there with our awl and in there so that we can mount that on there easily. So likewise this end, and we'll just tighten everything nicely and bring the tool rest just at or just above centre. Check that it spins freely. Put on our face shield. So there's a nice round piece of wood turned between centres. The next one I want to show you is a piece of wood which is a little bit bigger, and we can hold that straight off in a chuck. So take that out, put a chuck on, wind it on there, holding it in my hand and winding it on, lock the spindle and firm up the chuck. So now our piece of wood is of a size that will fit directly into that chuck. So at the same time we'll mark that end so that we can be sure that the wood is straight on the lathe. Bring up the tailstock, and just using the very tip of the step centre, hold it in place so we can be assured that it is nice and straight. Now the chuck holds this size piece of wood very nicely without you having to do anything there. Firm up the tailstock there, bring up the tool rest as before, check that it turns freely, and again let's just make that round. There we are, ready for whatever we want to do with it. The next piece we have is larger, so we want to start that again between centres. We will find the centre on this piece of wood, and the same on the other end. Put an awl mark in the middle of each, mount that between centers. That awl mark again helps us there to get that in, because the point of the step center goes into that little awl mark, and now we can cinch it up. Now this piece of wood is of a size that it could fit into a 100mm chuck directly, or we'll make a spigot on one end of it to fit a 50mm chuck. That means that we'll make a spigot that's 46mm diameter. Let's just sit the ruler there while we make the caliper here 46mm. Okay, we don't need to make it round to start with. We can just go with our parting tool and put a spigot on this end. Okay, face shield again. Now it may be that your chuck has a slope on the inside of the jaws, or like these, it is straight with a little bit of a lip. That little bit of a lip will bite in there nicely and hold that wood for you to turn it. For the screw chuck that we have, an 8.5 or a 9mm hole is required. And we don't want it too deep. For a piece of wood this size, fine, but we don't want to go overboard and drill a huge hole in our wood. And we'll drill down to that tape. That's enough there. So we can just get that into the center and check that it is the center. Yes. And we just want to drill deep enough for the chuck jaws to sit in and expand into to hold the wood. We'll mount a small bowl on a screw chuck, sometimes called the woodworm screw, specially made, this one, to fit within the chuck. Sometimes there are little face plates with a screw thread in the middle and things like that. This has some little faces on it, so it clamps inside the jaws, inside where you can see the jaws. And we can twiddle it round a little and we can find that there it is, it's seated on those. We've got the hole we've drilled in the center, and we just need to, again, we'll hold the wood while we rotate the lathe by hand and screw that in there, and it's a very secure way to hold small bowls. We can lock the spindle and give it a little more. We can see it coming firmly up against the jaws there. Okay, now just for our security, particularly while it's still rough, we'll bring up the tailstock and hold that there as well, because this is where some of the greatest hit and miss pressure is on the rotating wood. Okay, we can make that round and spend some time with that. Okay, that's a screw chuck. for small items and for bowls, we can go to the drill press and drill that cavity with a 54mm Forstner bit. Now this allows us to expand these jaws into that cavity. And that's a very good way when we've got a big block of wood and we want to make this the outside of our bowl. We do not recommend this method for holding the base of a bowl, because if you hold a base of a bowl on the expanding jaws, when you get your bowl thin, it can split it in half, or you drill that hole a bit too far and you just have a hole in the bottom of your bowl. So we recommend this for holding the fresh blank, and that's the top of our bowl, and we can now turn the outside of the bowl on here. Alright, next is to place, for a small bowl blank like this, we can place this between centres and just make sure it is straight between centres. Pretty good there. Hold it between centres. Don't try this with big pieces of wood. It's about the smaller ones. Check that it rotates. We're going to take a pair of pointed calipers and set them at 46mm, which is the diameter of our 50mm that our 50mm chuck will hold, and face shield on. Reduce the speed. Mark the size of the chuck bite that we want to have on there. Use a small bowl gouge . Now that will not be quite nice and square. We need to use our corner of a skew chisel . So again, we need to know before we cut that what the shape is inside that chuck. This one is straight with a little ridge. That ridge will bite in there nicely because we want that to be up against the wood as well as clamped on the wood. That will do it fine. Now that's the upper side of our bowl. We'll put it on the chuck and then turn the outside. Our next one is to put a faceplate on a piece of wood. So our wood and screws, faceplate, sit it at the center, and again, the size of this and the size of the bowl we might get out of it, we're better off to use the inner holes of this faceplate and so there is our faceplate, well secured, and again mount this on the lathe, rotate the spindle, hold the wood, and once it's there, lock the spindle and just firm that up. Or if you need to, firm it up with this spanner. So we can just make sure it is there. Because if we don't firm it up and you have a little dig in there, it slams those together and jams them permanently almost.